Well, hi, Jason. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Yeah, that was a really great video. I think it probably gave some good perspective to folks about what really goes on at the border. It's not just a place to pass through on your way somewhere else.
There's actually a community there.
Turns out, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about San Isidro. Who is that community?
So, as I said in the video, it's an interesting dichotomy because we have 35,000 people that are actually residents there, largely Hispanic, I think somewhere in the 85 percentile. We do have a lot of other ethnic groups based on the military being in the area, and San Isidro being one of those few affordable living places left. But like I said, 35,000 residents. But at any given time, you got 100,000 people. We've got about 100 in normal times, about 156,000 people cross the border every day in San Isidro. You can think of it in terms of, looking northbound and southbound, it's over 300,000. That's like the city of Chula Vista picking up and moving every day.
Yeah, and it is the busiest land border crossing in the world, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So what is it that's moving across the border? What are people doing when they're traveling that way?
Well, we've still maintained 100,000 people crossing between Baja and California. So it's the 3 San Diego crossings throughout the pandemic. So a lot of them are either expats or U.S. citizens living in Tijuana or Baja California and working up in San Diego. Now, what San Isidro has suffered was the other 40,000 or so that are tourist visas that haven't been allowed to cross in the last 19 months. So you've got our border. It's one of the few crossings, or the only crossing, I think, the U.S. southern border. You can actually walk from an American house to a Mexican house. There's no desert or river or anything between us. So that creates a different dynamic of those crossers. Like I said, everybody's from visiting family to going to school to going to work to shopping, etc.
Yeah, I remember as a kid going across just for an afternoon.
I can't tell you how many people give me the story of being in San Isidro waiting for Grandpa to cross, on a Sunday or something like that. So that's what makes us unique.
Yeah. So the pandemic has disrupted, and other government decision-making factors have disrupted not just business but families' lives.
Oh, absolutely. Our lives, our binational lives, absolutely.
Yeah. So 35,000 residents. 1,000 businesses? Tell me about the business.
Yeah, so we have about 736 to be exact.
Give or take.
Depending on the month, businesses that are certificated in what is San Isidro. The chamber has another 100 members or so, those that are interested in border crossing issues. But yeah, in the zip code of San Isidro, there's about 736 businesses.
And how have they fared?
Well, initially, I would say in the first 4 months of the border restrictions, we lost about 236 of those businesses.
So a third.
Yeah, just immediately. In the first 3 months, those businesses that were able to operate were only operating at about 24%, of their normal sales, etc. In San Isidro, we have sales in the neighborhood of 895 million every year.
Wow.
And so in normal times, obviously. So during the pandemic's 19 months, we lost 1.3 billion. That's with a B.
Wow. And what's the impact of that? I mean, does the repercussions extend beyond the San Isidro boundary?
Absolutely. Those numbers that I have are just for San Isidro. But you can go up to Fashion Valley and talk to a store manager, at the mall, and they'll tell you the market, the visual decrease in customers they have, because of those border restrictions. Unfortunately, there's not a border authority or a group that is actually monitoring all of those numbers throughout San Diego County or throughout California. But the best I can do is, give you San Isidro's numbers.
Yeah, no, that's really impactful. And you said there are members of the San Isidro Chamber of Commerce that aren't located in San Isidro. Why would a business from somewhere else care what happens?
Well, sure. Let's say you're Anheuser-Busch. You're not in San Isidro, but you provide to our restaurants. It's businesses like that. You're Sequan Casino, right? You're not in San Isidro, but you'd love for some of our those people crossing the border to get out to the casino and have fun out there. So it's like banks, of course, they aren't located necessarily in San Isidro, but want some of that business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that the city of San Diego cares what happens in San Isidro, since it's a community of the city of San Diego, although I don't know how many people would actually realize that.
Yeah, it's gerrymandering at its finest. There's about 18 inches of land, most of it underwater, along the west side of the 5 that connects us geographically. But yes, we are a community of San Isidro, community of San Diego. And yes, what we do obviously impacts the city of San Diego. I mean, like I said, you can't have $1.3 billion in lost sales and not have that effect be felt throughout the county.
Yeah, so how hard or easy is it for you to set policies and make changes to the benefit of the community and the businesses there, given that you're part of this bigger infrastructure of the city, not to mention everything that happens on the border with the federal government?
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Regardless of what's happening locally, at the end of the day, the people's ability to visit us is a federal decision. And for the past 19 months, we've seen that border communities have no representation in Washington. And that's not, based on any particular congressman or senator. I'm saying in general, border communities, just don't have a voice in Washington. So one of the proposals, my old military days, when something goes wrong, you show how it's never going to happen again. So one of the plans that we have, or what we're doing to make this, or to ensure this doesn't happen again, there's a group called the Border Mayors Conference. Okay. And so it's obviously all of the mayors along the border on both sides. And usually it's an annual luncheon where they'll do a slideshow of success in the region, et cetera. It's a great thing. It's wonderful to have those relationships. But what we want to add is advocacy. If that group becomes an advocacy group, now it's not just Mayor Gloria and Jason on the hill in San Isidro screaming, "We're dying," right? If I've got 40 or 50 mayors saying the same thing, then Washington has to start listening.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that with all the news in the last couple of years about the border, not just about the closure of the border due to COVID, but about people migrating from other countries through Mexico to come here, the detentions, all that sort of thing, how is that affecting just the general population's understanding of what it means to be a border community?
Well, therein lies our largest problem. And the reason that these border restrictions that should have been lifted over a year ago took 19 months to get lifted is because we can't I always talk about the guy in Ohio, but the person that's not in a border community to understand the differences in between all of those issues. So, for example, the migrant waves, while that impacts the CBP's abilities to work at the port of entry, it's got nothing to do with sales in San Isidro or with grandparents visiting their grandkids in Tijuana. And so it's the conflation of those issues that impacts us, and 90% of the time to a negative way.
Yeah. And how do you feel like the broader sort of San Diego and Imperial County population understands? Does it feel like people in other places know that they're part of a border community?
Right. It's funny. We often use, San Antonio, Texas is a border town.
Yeah.
Yet they're 300 miles from the border. They believe they're a border town more than San Diego does. I can't tell you how many people have told me that, live just north of the 94. Let's not even go north of the 8. That says, I haven't been to Tijuana in 20 years, or I haven't done this in 30 years. So it's interesting. It's part of the attractiveness of San Diego. There's just so much to do that parts get left out, but I can tell you, if you're not crossing the border, you're missing out on some of the best food you'll ever have, on some of the best rates on tourism you'll ever have. And if you're in Mexico and not coming back up, you're missing out on opportunities to get great items at great prices.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. What would be sort of the policy change that you'd hope to see? I think it's probably tied to this idea of getting more people to recognize that we are all together. We're all in together on this, right? Like the fate of what happens in San Isidro on the border impacts if you live in Oceanside or El Centro or Poway. Like, it matters. Right. Is there a story that we should be telling?
Well, I think for San Isidro, it always comes down to the gentleman or the gentlelady that's in the booth, right? Border wait times, how long they take to process you. because when wait times are down and there's an ease to legally cross that border, the good stories are going to happen. And your neighbor's going to tell you about the time that they went down to Avenida Revolucion and they took pictures with the painted donkey.
Yep.
And the time they went down to Rosarito, or this or that. Those stories are going to happen. Those interactions are going to happen. That's why we're a binational region, and we can grow from that. But again, it's just the ability to get to see one another. So beyond the advocacy of the Board of Mayors Conference, one of the other points that we're really pushing is that there be some kind of cabinet level committee, if you will, that includes private stakeholders such as chambers and so forth, that is actively looking at measuring the border wait times effects on our economy and on our lives. There used to be a time long ago, we worked with then CBP Commissioner Alan Burson, not only implementing the saying, but the implementing execution of a balance between economy and security. The reality is you can't have one without the other. And so he implemented that, and it got down to that gentle person in the booth. And if wait times started getting crazy, a simple call would get things back down. Unfortunately, with the fast presidential administration, those relationships changed, and CBP went back to working in a silo. So again, if we had what I see as some kind of a working group that includes the Secretary of Economy, the Commerce and Trade, the Secretary of State, because that's where our consuls are, right, that are here on the ground level, and that private stakeholder group. Just so that everybody knows we're watching and measuring those wait times, life could be better for all of us.
So it's an operational question. It's saying this is an economic engine, and there are certain bottlenecks, of which in particular wait times are one.
Right.
So we really just have to be thinking about that. Yeah. So interesting. And yet still having to deal with how do we create this sort of welcoming environment so that when people are crossing in either direction, this isn't about crossing through a sort of militarized experience, but rather like the gateway to a new...
And now you're getting into the whole point that we're here.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. San Isidro, I've talked about the damage that has been suffered. We really have an opportunity to be, for the future of San Isidro, to become America's finest front door to America's finest city. We have almost a blank board. With all those lost businesses, of course, our efforts are on helping those that have survived, but we've also got to put forth efforts on bringing new ones in. And it's really hard when you've got, I can tell you there's, 23,000 pedestrians that'll come into San Isidro each day. But my office, which is a block and a half down the road, 2 people can't walk shoulder to shoulder on the sidewalk.
Oh, okay.
Because it's about that wide.
Yeah.
So it's bringing the infrastructure up to the capacity of what our community is.
But tell the mayor we need sexy streets in San Isidro.
Absolutely. So we've actually, I don't know of another chamber that's done this. We've actually come up with the San Isidro Recovery Plan that has those 2 advocacy points that we talked about, but then also has a series of other, there's infrastructure improvements, then also a large pilot program for businesses. One thing that we've seen is with such an impact to the businesses on the decision to allow people to not be able to visit or not be able to visit, e-commerce is a way that we can diversify some of those sales. We're San Isidro. We're always going to be there for the border crosser. But if I can help a business increase his sales by 25-30% online, then maybe he can stick through a couple months of a border crossing restriction, or be able to last, or maybe lay off 1 or 2 less people than they did. Through the pandemic, 2,100 jobs were lost. Those are 2,000 families that lost their ability to feed their children. That's what we want to stop, and I think we can do that. We're going to need some help.
That's a big deal. 2,100 jobs in a population of 35,000 is high percentages. So the border is going to reopen to non-essential travel, quote unquote.
Yes.
Next month.
Next week.
What's that going to change? How's it going to look different?
So first of all, that's a government term. Every crossing, every person that crosses, every purchase that's made when they cross, they're all essential. Right, all of those 2,100 children that need their family's job to eat, they're all essential. So these are work-related and non-work-related crossings. So what will this mean? This is our lifeline. And so yes, actually a week from today, so on November 8th, the restrictions will be lifted for vaccinated visitors. I was at a conference this morning, and I think CBP is going to handle that well. Like I said, it always comes down to that wait time, right? And so they're going to be doing intermediate checking, right, of those vaccines. Everybody needs to have them, but they're not going to be checking 100%, which would cause a lockdown anyway. But yeah, we're very happy that our families and visitors are going to be able to come to visit us again. Like I said, we just need to go work on that recovery plan to maximize what this will mean for us in the future.
So you're a chamber of commerce, meaning you're there for the businesses. Do you play with philanthropy? Are you seeing investments? Are you seeing grants to support the work you're doing?
Yeah, it hasn't so far. And here's everyone's chance. We've seen in the last year and a half to 2 years, Sandag has put social equity into their mission statement. We've got a new mayor and a new supervisor that are both pushing social equity. Now it's time to see if those social equity dollars get south of the 94. Like I said, with this plan, we've got several items that have large tickets on them. So all of that support that all of these organizations and officials have given us through the 19 months of struggling, we want to make sure that they're there for us for the next 12 months of growth.
Yeah, so it's about relationships, right?
Absolutely.
It's about knowing that responding in a time of urgency is important, but this can't be a sort of it comes and then it goes sort of thing. This has to be sustained.
That's the reason I'm an optimist by nature.
Me too.
But I've had to spend the last 19 months crying about doom and gloom. But in part that was to really get our story out. Not just so much to cry about it, but to say, look, this is an actual American community being affected this way with no recourse. We're going to need some help getting out of this hole, and so that's what it's all about. Hopefully we've made those relationships you referred to make this happen.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's about strengthening our community as a whole. This isn't about a handout or dividing and allocating resources. This is about
we talked about those domino effects of the border closures. Well, there's also domino effects if we're able to rebuild and become, again, America's finest front door. That's going to help all of San Diego County.
I believe it. And we can walk back and forth through that front door as freely as possible.
And enjoy the sweet parts of both of our lives.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. This is wonderful, and we look forward to continuing to explore all that San Isidro has to offer and who we are as a border community.
Absolutely. Thank you.